All right, well, welcome back. We hope you all had a bitchin' summer. And yeah, there you go. That's what they wished me in my yearbook. Wanted to, a few items of housekeeping to start off with tonight. First of all, if you could silence your phones, please. If you haven't already, I always need a reminder. And that isn't just calls, if there's a way to turn off all of the little message dings. And honestly, if you can't figure out how to turn all of that stuff off, you got time, you can go stick the phone in your car. So that works. Also, if you've got, I don't think we have any of our snacks with wrappers back there tonight, do we? No, okay, all right. But I also wanted to, I've been asked to say something about if, we do encourage you to go over to our book table, and if there's anything you'd like a copy of, please purchase one and help support the society. There's some great publications over there. But if you've got food in one hand, please don't go over to the table till you finish that, because we're getting crumbs and grease spots and stuff on the books, and so that we don't want to burn through our stock that way. We'd rather have people taking them home and reading nice, fresh new books. So we had a few bits of news to pass along too. First of all, if you don't get the newsletter, you want to pass along that Don Dobmeyer passed away on August 2nd at the age of 80. He was the longest-serving member of the Orange County Historical Commission. He was a rescuer of numerous historic sites. He was the unofficial editor for countless books and articles. And he was the institutional memory for the Orange County historical community for decades and decades and decades. Don joined the Orange County Historical Society back in 1968. He went on our board in 1971, and other than a few little short breaks he took, he remained with the board until 2016. You may remember him, if for nothing else, as the guy who would greet you as you came in. He'd be standing outside in his brown corduroy jacket, greeting people as they came in. And you're the first person you'd meet as you came into the society's meetings. So. Anyway, he was a friend to a lot of us, certainly to me, and he was certainly a big part of our community. So, wanted to note his passing, and talking with his family, they suggested that as they start going through his materials and his papers, that perhaps the society would be an appropriate place for at least some of that. So, anyway, we will be in touch with the Dobmeyer family further, but. Anyway, I wanted to mention that. Also, wanted to recap, we had a great event this summer in July, the celebration of Judge Pleasance out at Majeska. And I want to thank Rob Brown, Mishi Rava, and our board, and especially Aida Cuevas, Mike Kluwer, Stephanie George, and Daniel and Dolores Clortel. Thanks also to Bradley Flint and all of the OC Parks people and their volunteers. And it was a great day. History, tours, nature, and tacos. So what's not to love? So it was a great day, and so looking forward to the events that will be coming up this year. Speaking of which, I wanted to mention in October here, our next meeting, Mike Skinner will be coming to speak on the topic of Disney's Wonderful World of Tiki. So, yeah. So it's sort of where Walt Disney and all the Imagineers collided with that whole mid-20th century Polynesian pop tiki craze, and all of these creative ideas they came up with, including, of course, the Enchanted Tiki Room and a good chunk of Adventureland, and a whole lot of other ideas that didn't actually end up happening, but were fascinating to see what they had up their sleeves nonetheless. Mike is a fantastic speaker. Anytime he's anywhere in Southern California, he lives in Denver, I always make it a point to get there, whatever topic he's speaking on. So that will, I'm looking forward to that. And then in November, on November 14th, will be Authors Night again. So we will have a whole new group of authors and to tell us about their books that have come out about Orange County history that have come out in the last year, and to sign and sell and so forth. So, and then later in the season, we will have Eric Plunkett back to tell more stories about early Orange County history, the Spanish and Mexican eras of Orange County. And I'm not sure which stories we're going to be hearing yet, but stay tuned. And then Hunter Fuentes will also be coming to talk about important architects of historic Laguna Beach. And he's been doing some great work. He's led a couple of tours. He's got a website he's got up now. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And then we are also, and I am not at liberty to discuss any details at this point, but we're in the beginning planning stages of talking about doing another bus tour along the lines of what we did with the Portola bus tour, those of you who remember that. But totally different topic, but it should be just as cool. So we're just beginning to start that process. So I want to mention, yes, our meetings are free and open to the public, but we do welcome donations. And really that just helps us defray costs, both for rent here, for rent for our storage unit, and rent for our office and archives. So it helps with all of those things. And I also want to mention, anybody here, I mean, obviously if you're here, you have an interest in Orange County history. I want to mention there is a group on Facebook called Orange County, California History. And I encourage you to join that. It is not a Orange County Historical Society production, although about half of the people on the who are moderators are board members here, but only half. So there's thousands of members there sharing stories about Orange County's past, and it's not a nostalgia group. It's not just remember how good the fries were down at Joe's Burger Shack? It's not one of those. It's history, and so I encourage you to check that out too. With that, on with the show. I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight. Stephen O'Neill has more than 35 years of experience as a cultural anthropologist and archaeologist in California. He has researched and written on ethnography, archaeology, and history, concentrating on the ethnohistory of Southern California tribal peoples. He grew up on the Orange County coast, received his master's degree in cultural anthropology at Cal State Fullerton, go Titans, and now lives in Laguna Canyon. He now works as Cultural Resources Manager for Ultra Systems Environmental in Irvine. His archaeological work has primarily focused on Native American prehistoric sites, but also Spanish, Mexican, and American period adobes. He has published in numerous scholarly journals on topics ranging from village place names to cosmology to medicinal plants. And for so many years, anytime the topic of the anthropology of early history of the area comes up, of archaeology, I have been hearing Stephen's name mentioned for as long as I've been in this business, and it's just a great pleasure to finally meet in person. So with that, welcome Stephen O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was reminded that I have given a talk to the Orange County Historical Society in the past, but that was like 1987. It was a little broad topic, everything there is to know about the local Native peoples, past, historic, and present. My parents came to that one, and I saw my father fall asleep. I have been told that I do have a certain time limit, They will help keep me to that time limit, so that's what we will do. Starting this talk, though, I want to acknowledge two aspects. One is that we do have members of the Acjachemen tribe with us this evening in the audience, and also that we are on tribal lands. In this area, it was along the Santa Ana River, nearby that. It's primarily Gabrielino or Tongva, but this was also an interaction area, and especially to the south of us were the Acjachemen lands. And the talk itself will be on Mission San Juan Capistrano, which was founded in the middle of Acjachemen territory. Another side point is I find myself with a microphone in one hand and this device in the other, which means that I cannot be holding my notes to look at. So I will be looking at the screen just as much as you are to remember, some of the specifics. So the chiefs could see what was coming. The 1778 Acjachemen Revolt in Mission San Juan Capistrano. This was almost a unique event, and one that really was not known until a colleague found the actual military report of this event in the Bancroft archives, and another colleague kindly translated it and let me know about it. This is going to talk about the background of the revolt, why it happened, the document itself, and why we can trust it and what it adds not only to history, but to knowledge of the social structure and politics within the Acjachemen tribe itself. And it's a unique document, and also in the sense that we have naturally the Spanish Army point of view, but the interrogation of the leaders of the revolt was so thorough and so complete that you can see the Acjachemen point of view as to why they wanted to have this revolt and get rid of the Spanish missionaries and army. Now let's start with the idea that the priests thought that the inhabitants of the region around Mission San Juan Capistrano that came to be Mission San Juan Capistrano were actually particularly receptive to the Christian faith and to the missionization by the Franciscan friars. They had been, 1769 is when Portola first came up, founded the first mission, San Diego. 1776, they got around to Capistrano, which was about the fifth mission to be founded. Whoop, no, not that one. There we go. This is Father Palau, who spoke with the missionaries who came into that area. As it says, the Father wrote to me at the beginning that other missions, they would molest the missionaries for edibles and presents. At Capistrano, they molested the missionaries for petition for baptism because the period of instruction was too long. This is from Father Junipero Serra himself, that he visited the rancherias and met everywhere with great cordiality. To give them instruction will not be very difficult. Not me. Easier, in fact, than has been the case with other missions founded before this. So that was the attitude of the missionaries and their perspective on the Acjachemen people. The baptismal rates actually seem to confirm this. At Capistrano, if I can get that, sorry. The first year there were 44 baptisms. Within 3 years there were 234. San Gabriel to the north, founded several years before. The first year there was 1 baptism. After 3 years, there was only a total of 75 baptisms that had taken place. Mission San Diego, there are some problems with the records because you may have heard of the destruction of the mission, 1775. But within the first 9 months, there were no baptisms. After 4 years, there were 37 baptisms. So you see, what was happening in Capistrano led to that impression that things were very well received. Then there's the Spanish Army. They had a different perspective. They had different responsibilities. They recognized, such as at the Presidio of San Diego in 1778, there were a total of 52 soldiers. The Southern California Indian population was approximately 45,000, maybe more. In those first few years at San Diego, the Portola encampment, their encampment on the beach was attacked. People were killed. When San Gabriel Mission, they tried to found San Gabriel Mission, the first place that they selected was up on the Santa Ana River, and they were attacked. They had to move on to where they eventually did locate it, where it is now. Mission San Diego was destroyed completely in 1775. When they started to found Mission San Juan Capistrano, there was supplies coming from San Gabriel. That was attacked. There was, in 1777, a year after the founding, there was a battle between several village warriors and the military in San Mateo Canyon. San Mateo Canyon is about where Camp Pendleton, the border Camp Pendleton with Orange County is. Military couriers were attacked in San Diego area that year. And in March 1778, 3 Kumeyaay, Diegueño villages, their clans and chiefs got together and were planning another attack. There's a report from the military saying that they are almost in constant peril and anxiety. They were very aware that if the native peoples combine and put together a forceful attack, they could easily push all the Spanish into the ocean with their numbers. This is the document itself. As I said, a colleague, Dr. Chester King, found it, brought it to the attention of Dr. John Johnson, who then got the whole document, translated it, and sent me a copy. And I have previously let the Acjachemen community know of this report, and they're aware of it. Now, 1778, the mission had been founded 2 years before at a village called Quanasajavit. That's about 3 miles north up what's now Ortega Highway from where the mission is today. In 1778, it was being relocated. There wasn't enough water up there. So they brought it down to where 2 streams confluence. This is how most people think of the missions. This is not how they started. This is what they look like at the very beginning, when you just had a few soldiers and they were able to convince a few of the Indians to help them put up huts, brush structures, just to get out of the, just to get inside something, just to put their supplies. And this is what the mission would have been like probably the first 5 years before they could start substantial construction. So this is the Mission San Juan Capistrano at the time of the revolt. So, the end of February 1778, they had missionaries, there were a number of people baptized, the soldier guard was there, and it was usually kind of heavy the first few years, about 10 members of the guard. There was a report from a neophyte cook telling them that the Franciscan priests were considered demons who laid waste to their seed supply. That the priest had offended a chief's son by marrying his woman, probably his wife, to one of the Baja California Indian servants that had come up with them. And there had been the attack in San Mateo Canyon the year before, where several of the Indian warriors were killed. Then, with that report, the corporal of the guard and the soldiers started looking around, and they could see that there were actually Indian warriors on the move from the mountains northward toward the mission and along the coast north toward the mission. They could see this happening, so that confirmed what the cook told them. So according to the report itself, there was the warning of the revolt and an attack was imminent. This was February 27th. The corporal of the guard sent a messenger the very next day to the San Diego Presidio telling them of the warning and asking for help. The messenger rode overnight to get there late morning the next day. Now, I'm sure you all know that route from San Juan Capistrano down to Old Town San Diego, which is where the Presidio is. Imagine doing that on horseback and getting there as fast as you can to get help. They pushed that horse to get there by the next morning. It says they got there in the morning. Sergeant Mariano Carrillo was dispatched that same afternoon with 7 soldiers, again riding overnight. Those reinforcements arrived at 2 a.m. the next morning. And that very next day of March 2nd, they found out who the ringleaders were of the Klan revolt, where they were, and they went out and captured about 3 of them and interrogated them the next day. Oh, sorry. You see here that the corporal of the guard was Corporal Guillermo Carrillo. Sergeant down in San Diego was Sergeant Mariano Carrillo. Those were brothers. These are the ancestors of Leo Carrillo, who gave us Carrillo Beach, and became a very prominent family throughout all the history of California. So, one thing I did first, as an academic, was how can we trust this document? How much of it can we corroborate? There are names of villages throughout, there are names of people throughout. This man, Leonardo, he was the Antigua or Baja California Indian who came up as a servant, and we know that they said that he married an Acjachemen woman. Well, that's the record of the marriage in June 1777, corroborated that. There are Spanish names given to locations throughout this Capistrano area. There were also Acjachemen village names that were mentioned in the report. I was able to corroborate all of those except Las Lagunas. La Laguna. Now, I just cannot find any other record of that name being used in the region. I had all kinds of maps. But La Laguna, it's somewhere along the coast. Taban is Tabane, here at Dana Point. Chacapa is down here. Hunga is Huunga, up there. Amalgan, that does appear in the mission records as the baptismal point of origin for several people, but we do not know where that village was. We know it's somewhere here in San Mateo Canyon. That's about it. So, it's looking good. They're getting things right. They mentioned that they wanted revenge for the men killed in San Mateo by soldiers. Well, we know from other records that Corporal Carrillo and 5 men were sent into that San Mateo area to chastise a village. 3 Indian men were killed and several were wounded during that confrontation. It turns out a year later, the missionaries finally looked into what was going on. And the Indians were extremely upset because soldiers were taking women from that village to use as prostitutes. That's what they were upset about. And they didn't bother to find out why. So they went in and chastised them, killing several of them. So the report itself, talking to the leaders of the revolt, said that the missionaries had offended the capitancillo there by taking a woman that was his, and her they married to a California Indian. Later, they said that the man who was probably her legitimate husband tried to take her away and kill the man that she had married. And that man, Leonardo, was warned by everyone, don't try going down to the beach to fish. We'll get you on the way. Now, Capitancillo's woman, mujer, that's also the word that's used for a wife in Spanish. So it probably was his actual wife in traditional society. That's unusual for the missionaries to take a married woman and marry her off to someone else. The missionaries traditionally try to keep traditional Indian marriages intact and recognize them. So something unusual was going on here. The chief's son, Capitancillo, Little Capitan. In traditional Acjachemen society, a chief's son could be, a ceremony would take place when he was a youth that recognized his eventual role as captain or chief of the clan. So this was a very important person. This was a person invested with leadership in the clan. And the clan chief, and by extension his son, sorry, there we go. Yeah. They had limited temporal authority within their clan, but they had great moral and spiritual authority. They represented the clan. They kept medicine bundle that was the heart of the clan. Therefore, anything that happened to the chief as a person, as an insult, was an insult to the entire clan. And you'll see what the effect of that could be in a few minutes. Now, this marriage is a very important aspect. Sukukainam Maria Magdalena was the daughter of Zogela of Acjachemen. Acjachemen was the village where the mission was shifted to just a few months before the revolt took place. That was the new location. That was the village that the mission was now being settled amongst. She was married eventually to Leonardo from Baja California. But you see, she was baptized June 10th, 1777. Then she was married off to this man June 12th. The missionaries were doing something here. You don't get baptized and then get married off to a Christian 2 days later. This is something that they had been planning. We don't know exactly why, but it's significant that this took place within 2 days of her baptism. She was baptized so that she could be married to a Christian Indian. But Leonardo and Maria did stay married. They had 3 children, and she died about 15 years later at the age of 31. Soon after that, Leonardo married another Acjachemen woman. They had 4 children. One of them did survive to marry and have children themselves. And that family is still in the Acjachemen community in San Juan Capistrano. So that was the one thing that they were upset about. And the other thing that they were angry about was the statement, the fathers and soldiers are devils that have come to lay waste to the seeds of these lands. Since they have come, it does not rain nor produce seed. Well, the mission became a community within the Acjachemen territory. Most communities interact with each other. Most communities are made of men and women. You have ceremonial reciprocity between the clans. You have intermarriage between the clans. You know each other. This new community, though, first of all, it only had men. So there was no way to have marriage reciprocity between this new community and the other villages. Second of all, it had a foreign religion. So again, no ceremonial reciprocity between the two. There was no way to fit them in to the local society. Now, among local societies, among local tribes, there was often always conflict over resources, over land. Not bad, not horrible warfare, but some conflict, a little push here and there. Part of warfare is both physical through arms and magical through shamanistic practices. There was both ways to attack each other. Well, this new community as a mission had that in spades. One entire set of men there were warriors, and that's all they were. The other two men who were in charge were shamans, and that's all they were. So they were very powerful, representing the two types of warfare that would take place. So what happened with the seed crop? What was the problem there? Well, seeds, primarily grass seeds, could be up to 25% of the local diet, more or less, depending on the year, the crops, what the terrain was around a particular village. So that was a critical resource for food, 25% of the diet. If you lose 25% of your food, you could lose 25% of your population without that. There was also stories of villages in the past where the entire population moved because of a shortage of seed production in their area. That's one of the legends for one of the founding clans among the Acjachemen. It shows how important seed production, grass production is. So, what was happening? You know, we saw with the situation with the Capitan CEO and his wife being taken, that was a real thing. We have the baptisms, we have the marriage records showing what happened to her. For this seed production, it turns out through dendrochronology studies, we know that in this immediate area, there was a 2-year drought in the winters of 1776, 77, and the following year, 1777, 78. The mission was founded in the winter of 1776. Guess who they associate that drought with? And that in 1778, it was still happening. This was the start of the revolt. They just couldn't take it anymore. You know, they were in danger. Had to get rid of these people that were destroying their seed crop. So that confirms, again, the native point of view of what was happening. Now, there was a very well thought out plan of attack. Again, these are the villages associated through the record. There was a consensus. Chiefs who were wanting to have this revolt thought it was necessary, sent themselves and sent messengers, sent their assistants out to the other villages to negotiate and work with the other clans to have them join, so there was a combined attack. The chiefs of Sajavit and Chakapa. Sajavit is right there where the first mission was founded. Chakapa is down here. They sent companions. Well, these companions were the sub-ceremonial leaders under the clan chief to negotiate. The soldiers of the guard, when this was about to take place, could see warriors from the mountain villages heading this way, and soldiers, warriors from the coastal villages also heading north. There was also a plan on how to attack both the soldiers and the priests. They recognized the soldiers were warriors like themselves, so that's the tactic you use. They also recognized that the priests were shamans, so they would use their ceremonial leaders and their abilities to attack the priests. There was also a note that they were going to have to do something about the horse herders of the guard. They knew how important the horses were to the Spanish soldiers' ability to overcome Indian warriors. We also found out that the chief of Chief Acjachemen of Tabane and Hunga was regarded as a regional war leader. And so someone like that from Tabane and here, very separate villages, but he had authority in both of them and could be a regional war leader. So they were putting all those resources into this. So, as it says, a quote from one of the chiefs and Pahas that were interrogated, for the soldiers, he saw arrows were needed. There was also war clubs available. For the fathers, he did not need arrows. That with the herb, he would kill them as he had killed various Gentiles. So this was a clan leader who, also went after his enemies among, within the tribe, and knew how to take care of them. This is a ceremonial regalia, the eagle feather kilt that was used in ceremonial dances, headdress, and these pavu wands are one of the types of ceremonial regalia that was used. Usually these wands were about 2.5, 3 feet long. They would have power stones inserted into the top, tourmaline, white clear quartz. Sometimes there was an arrow point. Just an interesting point is that the one that survived that has an arrow point still in it, in a museum, it was not a contemporary arrow point. It was an arrow point that had been found in what we would consider an ancient archaeological site. When they dug that up, it was an arrow point, but it was not made by a human. It was not made by anyone they knew, which meant that it was a spirit-produced arrow point. And therefore, that would be a very powerful element to put onto their wand. So, here was the revolt. They were engaged in planning it. We know the reasons why. All the three reasons that they gave for having a conflict with the Spanish proved true. They were based on reality. Now, the guard coming up there, capturing the leaders, put a stop to it right then and there. They couldn't progress with the attack on the mission. They were found out, interestingly, by a snitch, the neophyte cook who told on them. If that hadn't happened, who knows what would have happened to early Mission San Juan Capistrano. And so everything fell apart at that point. But there are some ramifications. One of them is for determining more knowledge about the traditional way of life, the social organization on a larger scale. There's no other record among people who interviewed the Acjachemen, looking at historical records, interviewing people, unfortunately not until the turn of the last century. We never heard that there was a regional war chief. This is a new idea to the anthropologist, that such a role existed within that society. It's pretty cool that they would have that, and that there was this much clan cooperation. We generally think of the clans as all completely independent from one another. There was no higher political authority than your clan. You cooperated because you had to live with everyone in the region. Your intermarriage, your reciprocity between ceremonies. But politically, your clan and your chief was your only authority. But now we know there was more clan cooperation on putting together big works like this. Also, the use of the paha as a messenger. The paha is like a sub-chief. The chief himself, his title is Nu, N-U. It's often called a messenger, the paha. But obviously now we know it was much more than this. The paha could also do ceremonies. The paha could be the negotiator for the chief, speak for the chief to other clans. Something else that we didn't have evidence of, it made sense that this happened, but we never had anyone provide a clear picture that it had. You saw that the village of Amauge in San Mateo Canyon had been very much involved. They were probably the ones that were attacked in 1777 by the guards and lost several men. We know that all the people in the San Mateo Canyon area were going to be involved with the revolt. You know, we know the name of the chief. But what happened to them after the revolt was squashed? To put warriors into the field, you have to have a minimum sort of population, you know, to meet the demographics necessary for warriors. Let's say you only put 5 adult men into the field. You still need about 45 people in your village, men and women, children, elders, to have at least 5 guys in the field. What happened to them? The problem is that in the subsequent mission records, among all the baptisms, and I did 2,500 baptisms to see who was there and the population of the villages. Only 4 people were ever baptized from the village of Amauge. Other villages had a minimum of 16. Some of them had upwards of 60, 70. One very large village had over 250. What happened to all the other people of Amauge? The logical assumption is that with the putting down the revolt, the chief here and his people knew that they were going to get swept up in this new social order. They were going to get taken into the mission. They were going to lose their way of life. They were going to lose their religion. And they didn't want that to happen. So they packed up and they moved away. All I can figure is that they moved to another part of local territory with their cousins, the Luiseno Indians, with whom it was the same ethnic group. It was the same language. They could move over the Santa Ana Mountains into the San Jacinto Basin. They could move farther into the mountains, the Santa Margarita Mountains, south in San Diego County, join probably relatives that they had intermarried with to a degree before, and live out their lives there, away from the missionization that was going on in Capistrano Valley. By the time the missionaries at Capistrano got into the San Jacinto Valley, about a generation had lapsed. It was the 1790s. By the time Mission San Juan was founded in the 1790s, it was still another 10 years before they got throughout the Palomar Mountains. So the identity of the Amalgay people, Amalgay clan, would have been subsumed within the people the generation later they had moved in with. But I'm very sure that many of the native people could see that this was going in a bad way, going in a bad route. And probably clans and certainly lineages within the clan left the area in order to not be taken up in that new social order. And the baptismal records and the knowledge we have of what Amalgay had been show that this is the most likely explanation for them not showing up in the mission registers. Now, we're getting all this new information, first-hand account on society, first-hand account from the tribes. Some years later, Father Geronimo Boscana would have spent 10 or more years working with the Luiseno, as I said, are closely related, and the Acjachemen people. He learned their language. He was fascinated by their culture. He took notes. He interviewed to learn about their society. And he put together a large manuscript that was eventually published in 1848. There was a whole chapter of the Indian Wars, and he gave this background, why motives for warfare, revenge for killing people within your clan, theft of goods, there had to be a lot of goods, a lot of material, neglect to reciprocate customary presents at a fiesta. That sounds kind of minor to us, we bring a bottle of wine, we bring a gift. In traditional society, if a clan invites another clan and they don't bring the expected items to that ceremony, that means there's some very deep rift going on. And if they don't do that, if you don't know what that rift is, you start looking for it, because that could lead to something very serious down the line. Related to this was that it's the chief that declares war following discussion with the Puplem. The Puplem is the clan council, leaders of the lineages within the clan and other specialized ceremonial leaders. That's the council he goes to discuss major events. Only after discussion with them would he declare war. And he could enlist aid from other clans with gifts and persuasion. This is what Boscana got, and this is what we've been using as ethnographic information on the Acjachemen people from the late 1800s up to 1970. This was the main source. now that we have this interrogation, part of it, nice thing, is that we can corroborate what Boscana said. We didn't know if he got it right or wrong. We only had his word for it. But the interrogation says yes, revenge for killing tribesmen, theft of seed resources by magic, by intruders. Well, that's also theft of goods. Attack by magic from another clan. We also know action against a clan's chiefly elite by theft of a wife. So again, that's an attack, an insult to your clan leader who represents all of the clan. There could be individual acts of revenge intermingled with group action. And we also confirm that the chief sent companions, the Baha'is, to other clans to enlist aid. So we got from this interrogation, as a result of the planned revolt, a lot of new information on the Acjachemen people. We also know that they were not sitting back and just taking this, what was happening to them. They could see what was going on, and they wanted to change their destiny. But the Spanish military was just too powerful. But we also got a lot of new good information, confirming past ethnographic information and getting new information. So that's what we learned as anthropologists and some of the tribal members who got this material, what we now know. So, why I titled it this? The chief saw what was coming. It was the perceptiveness of the clan chiefs and the Puplem, the village and clan councils. They could see, after just 2 years of the missionaries and the soldiers being there, a coming cultural, social, and political domination by these foreigners. This image here is one of the construction of the San Francisco Presidio. And you can see that they had made workforces out of the local Indian people, conscripted labor, marching in a row with a soldier with a rifle behind them, making sure that they did the work that they were told to do at the Presidio. And you see other soldiers here overseeing the labor. This is what was coming. Also this. These are photographs of Juaneño at Mission San Juan in the 1880s. Because of the massive amount of disease that wiped out 80% or more of the population, at first it took the children who were being born at the mission. You saw that the Leonardo and Maria Magdalena had 3 children. They all died before they could marry and have children themselves. The woman that he married later, Leonardo, and the second Acjachemen woman, they had 4 children. 1 survived to marry and have children. That was the common demographics. Afterwards, the diseases hit while the population was at the mission attacking adults. It hit the elderly, and it hit the children. That robs the ability of the lineage and the clan to pass on knowledge, to pass on tradition, to pass on the religious rites. Because a lineage has to pass on from the leader to the other elite within that family. You can't just pick someone at random and train them. It was a very hierarchical society in that regard. So if you, the wrong children, the wrong boys die before they can be trained, or if the elder dies before he can pass it on, you've lost that traditional knowledge. So, but what happened? Obviously the Acjachemen were still here. Mission San Juan Capistrano was still here. So this is a continuing debate, a continuing sometimes confrontation, sometimes there's some resolution. There are people that I've known in Capistrano, members of the tribe, who would never set foot within the walls of the mission. We have others who are deacons within the church and helping with the Eucharist. The statue on the right is of Corone, the woman who, by legend, was the chieftainess of the first Acjachemen village. The Junipero Serra High School is founded on that village, on the top of it. But they put up a statue of her. On the left is another one, image that I rather like. The bumper sticker, I'm Indian and I vote. Oop. And this one I always like. There are several bands of Acjachemen Indians based on different families, different locations. This one, the leader of this particular band, also was a janitor at the mission and the mission school. So guess where the chairs for the band meetings came from? Thank you. I did see you put your fist up a few minutes ago. I went over a bit.
Right about on the money. So
Good.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Are there?
Do you have time for a
Yes.
few questions?
I was going to say, you do have
I
time.
have a few questions. Here, let me.
So I've got two topics. First one relates to the northern. I've asked you this question before about the northern boundary of the Juaneño tribe. Yeah, and I
And the
know you've said
southern
it's not
boundary-
Aliso Canyon. It's San Joaquin Hills.
No, I never said that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That is what almost all reports say.
Okay.
And,
So are you saying it's Aliso Canyon? I'm sorry.
no. Okay, here we go. Yeah, the question is, where is the dividing line between the northern boundary of the Acjachemen
Yeah.
and the southern boundary of the Tongva or Gabrielino people? Now, almost every report written the past, well, it's now what, 2024, since 1910, let's say, nearly up to the present, refers to Aliso Creek in central Orange County as the boundary line, geographic boundary line between them. So, one thing I will say, there is no boundary line ever between any tribes. It's not like political boundaries that we have in the modern era where you could put a line on the ground and say, this is ours and that's theirs. It's more based on where do you live and what are your resource areas and what do you use. Knowing that, well, briefly, Aliso Creek never made sense as a boundary. It's right down the middle of a creek. I mean, you don't stop and not hunt the rabbit on the other side of the creek. The other is that using this concept of where do you live, where are your villages, and what is the resource area of those villages. That's one of the things that I did early on was I tried to figure out where the Acjachemen and where the Tongva villages were. And I used linguistics to figure out, okay, which are in this language names and which are in those language names. They're very closely related languages. I mean, it's like Spanish and Portuguese. You know, very closely related. But like Spanish and Portuguese, you can see some differences, consistent differences. I was able to figure out that the Tongva did have their settlements all along the Santa Ana River. Through marriage patterns, you know, who you're marrying with, Acjachemen villages seem to go up to at least Laguna Canyon area. Yes. Along the coast, we don't know what the villages were. There are probably 3 of them, but we can't put a name to them. Inland, there were no villages because it was the Ciénaga de los Anas, a swamp. That's why I-5, which follows El Camino Real, which followed Indian route, curves and goes around that. And you can, if you look at the map, you can still see the curve in the I-5 today that follows that boundary of the Ciénaga de los Anas. So no one lived there. On the other hand, now we know, oh, the other point was why not Aliso Creek? There was never any good evidence to support that in the first place. This was learned by a famous and almost the only man who started anthropology in California back at the turn of the last century, Alfred Kroger. He interviewed tons of people. He interviewed people down south here. There weren't that many people to interview, unfortunately, because of the reasons I told you, showed you here. He learned from one Gabueno person, one Gabueno man, that he thought the boundary was along Aliso Creek. And the phrase that Kroger used was, it is said that the boundary was along Aliso Creek. That is the one and only piece of information we have to support that, which isn't much of a support. And I think that the work that I did with village place names and resource areas and the language provides a little firmer evidence of what that boundary could have been. Now, along with all that, there was still intermarriage between the Tongva and the Acjachemen people. So there was people moving back and forth across those boundaries anyway. I saw your hand up
Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
before.
was wondering, what kind of clothes do they wear? Like during the winter, do they wear bear clothes? Do they use deer? Or what is their main clothing?
Not much. Even during the winter, not much. The women had a grass kilt that was partly for modesty, partly because they were sitting down on the ground a lot doing the grinding, so they wanted to have something to sit on there. The men less than that. But remember that rabbits were a huge part of the diet. For every 100 pounds of deer, which was just a once in a while thing, they probably had 500 pounds of rabbit. Because you could send the teenage boys out with a throwing stick every afternoon and bring in 2 rabbits for the pot that night. Rabbits, believe me, they did not waste the fur on those rabbits. They cut them into strips and used them to weave cloaks out of. So that looked good, but during the wintertime, they were very nice to put on. But that was pretty much it, for this area. Some of the women of the tribes to the north did use deerskin kilts, skirts, but that was not observed very much south of the Santa Ana River. They could have if they wanted to. I mean, they knew about them, and they did use, obviously, deerskin for things as well, but it was not a common use.
So they had horses already.
Pardon?
Did they use horses?
What's a horse? Don't know what a horse. Don't know what a horse is.
Is that 1776 or so? I thought the horses came earlier. Is that the Spaniards?
That's in the southwest. Absolutely not around here. The only horses were what the Spanish military were riding when they would attack the Indians. Later on, as the missions grew, the populations grew, and they started animal husbandry and the ranches, they had huge cattle ranches at the missions. The Indians learned how to ride horses and become the cowboys. There was already a law saying that you could not let Indians have horses because they knew the danger if they wanted to, learn to use them like the soldiers did. But the priests had no other way to manage the herds. They had to let the Indians learn. And later on, when the missions were disbanded, ranchos were formed. The Indians were the vaqueros. In California, it was not cowboys and Indians. The Indians were the cowboys in California.
I traveled extensively all the way from Capistrano all the way to the back of the O'Neill Ranch, years and years. I have never been able to find one name of the native name, period, the way they pronounce it. I've always found in Spanish and English or other languages, but my interest has always been what is the pronunciation of a peak, a river, or some area that was sacred to them. In their own name and own language, they could pronounce it. I haven't been able to find any at all.
Well, no, there's very little published on that. Fortunately, there was an anthropologist and linguist in the 1930s who was particularly interested in that sort of subject, and he did go out and interview a number of traditional people that still had knowledge, people of the Luiseno tribe who had knowledge of this area as well because of the interrelatedness. I do have a couple of publications, but they're kind of obscure journals. I can get one to the Historical Society so they would have it on record. But there are a number of places that were sacred, geographic, topographic locations, peaks were. Saddleback Peak, the combined peak was, yes, no, that was one peak. The combined peak was, yeah, thank you. But it has to do with the fact that it was a wooded place. You wouldn't know that now because the mission used up most all the good timber on the Santa Ana Mountains to build the mission. But yeah, a wooded area. Calalpa is the name of one of the peaks. There is Los Pinos, which I think is one of the places that just got burned a couple of days ago. If you look toward the mountains, you see Saddleback, a higher peak, and then there's a peak that's rounded, just like a mound. Taraja.
Who was the anthropologist that did that?
Oh, sorry. Name is John P. Harrington.
Oh, Harrington.
Yes, Harrington. There are also places along the coast. There was a sacred cave that was filled with water during the high tide and emptied out so that people could go in and do ceremony. If you did the ceremony right, you would go through a tunnel and come out in San Juan Canyon, almost directly across from the mission. That is named. And the exit cave in Trabuco Creek area is also named. There's a few places like that. It'd be nice if we could find a way to get that to the general public, though. And I'm never sure about the pronunciation. All I see is the letters that are used to spell those words. How you do an X or a double X in Acjachemen as opposed to English or Spanish, there's unfortunately hardly anyone I can ask to get that right. And those that do know don't live in the area anymore. Yes?
You mentioned that it was the perceptiveness of the tribal leader and the council who saw that the missions could destroy their way of life. I'm wondering, was there any evidence, or is there any evidence of them communicating with the tribes down in the San Diego area who might have clued them into what was happening in San Diego?
That's a really good idea, and I wish there was records that could speak to that. The problem is that all the records we have are from the Spanish.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that they didn't care what the Indians were thinking. Some of the soldiers actually did learn and did care, like Mariano Carrillo. He eventually spoke Luiseno pretty fluently. But the only reason we know that is that there was a murder trial. And the people involved at the mission, the neophytes involved with the murder, were taken down to the San Diego Presidio, and the sergeant interviewed them. So we know that he was pretty fluent. But it's only records like that that are kept. And unfortunately, still most of those records are in the Spanish archives down in Mexico City and in Sevilla. I just have not, in my career, had an opportunity to go visit those. It'd be wonderful to see what else is there. We've got the, what is it, 4 volumes of Father Sarah's letters. But again, it's from their point of view and the things that they were interested in. In some ways, the clans and the tribes were fairly insular. Some people could speak 3 languages. Other people never went more than 10 miles away from home. So the interaction between the Acjachemen and maybe the Kumeyaay, you'd have to go a long ways through Luiseno territory, maybe Cupeño territory before you got there. So not much interaction that way. Interaction started to happen about 20, 30 years later, as the missionaries went out beyond the tribal territory that their mission was founded in, and were baptizing, bringing in people from other surrounding nations. And those people could then interact and exchange stories at the mission. But the problem is that the other reason they were going out and getting people from a wider area is because so many people had already died at the mission that they needed to go out to other tribes and to bring people in.
Right, well, thank you very much. Fantastic. That was great. Thank you. Well, just a few more points I want to make. One, we do have books for sale back there at the back table, so if you'd like to take some Orange County history home with you, that's a good way to do it. Also, if you are not already a member of the society, and I see a number of new faces here tonight, you can sign up and become a member for a very nominal price for the year at the back table, or with Lynn at the table near the entrance. She has forms as well. And we do meet here 10 times a year, plus history hikes, plus tours, plus other special events. And so you get something out of it. I also wanted to mention, if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, we've been there's a lot of videos there. Both Mike Kluwer and now Rob is doing this beautiful production work for us, putting together a lot of our programs there. So if you've missed something, you may be able to go back and catch it. Not all of our programs are done that way. It's just up to which speakers are happy to be broadcast that way. But that is something you can check out on YouTube. So, and then just a personal favor. At the end of every meeting, at the beginning of every end of every meeting, I end up having to pick up all the chairs. Now, sometimes I get help with that, and sometimes I don't. It just depends on who hangs around after for a little while after the meeting. But if somebody, if any of you would be willing to kind of help tonight and maybe some of the other nights to stick around after the meeting, and we just make stacks of the loose chairs. Not the ones around the table, they're fine, but the loose ones scattered around the room, we stack them up over here against the wall with the windows. That would help a bunch. Many hands make light work. So with that, I want to thank our speaker, Stephen O'Neill, for a fantastic program. We're coming away knowing a lot more than we knew coming in, and that's what we're here for. And I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and welcome back to another year of the Orange County Historical Society. Help yourself to goodies at the back. Good night.